So I'm not trying to create any tension here. I'm just trying to wait until. Followed by town. Yeah, you definitely want to mute. I don't know what you're trying to. Caroline, can you unmute me? I'm inside the meeting with my phone. Can you unmute me? I'm going to be using my phone.
Okay, let me find you. Yeah.
And then unmute that on the, unmute it on the screen. So I'm going to mute it that way.
All right, it's muted on the screen.
Got it.
Okay, I just unmuted you. Or at least I asked to, wait a minute. Oh yeah, there we go.
I should be here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty well. Yeah. Yeah, I could hear you. I could hear you better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just got a comment saying David is much better now. Great.
I'm trying my best every day. It's a you know.
And we appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Jerry, you don't try.
I'm trying to mute this, but it doesn't let me mute it completely.
Mute the computer.
That's the other sleep. All right. Okay. Okay, can you hear? Caroline, please put up the blessing for the Torah.
Yes.
You know what? We'll just use this as the sound, okay?
Oh.
Is that better? Great.
Yeah, it's better, yeah.
All right, here we go. 15 minutes, not bad. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu. Great. All right, everybody, great. So it's not easy moving even 30 feet across the street because we don't have access to this building all the time. And so all of the preparations that Eden and the staff would be making would be charged because of the contentious relationship between us and the church, which needs to be healed. And it's actually very difficult for the team here to really function as smoothly as we were. We have a small team, and there are a lot of things that have to happen. And every time we come in and use the space, there's a charge, even to set things up. And so we're just tinkering with everything. So thank you for your patience. Let's learn Torah. All right. This week, Parshat Ki Tavo, if you can put the share the sheets, Caroline.
Yes, 1 second.
Parshat Ki Tavo has in it what's called Mikra Bikurim, the first fruit ritual. It's chapter 26, verse 11, verses 1 through 11 exactly. So we're going to look at that, and then we'll look at some Hasidic Torah about Bikurim, and then we'll try to make up the 15 minutes somehow on the other end. If you could also ahead of time for just this week, tell the musicians to wait until we're finished. We're going to be finished at 10, not so just to hold off on the music and everything so we can finish the last 15 minutes. We'll get our hour and 15 minutes in of cardio Torah. Ready? Here we go. So waiting for Caroline. Okay. Ki tavo el haaretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha nachala v'rishta v'yashavta ba. And it will be when you come into the land that God is giving you as an inheritance, right? as a heritage, and you possess it. The Yishavta, and you settle it, right? Villa kachta, and you take. Reshit kopri adama, verse 2. You'll take from the beginning, Reshit, from the beginning of your first fruits, but the fruits of the adama, right? Pri adama, not from the bikurim of animals. There is such a thing. We already know about that. That's there are laws around the bechor, the firstborn of cattle, and so on. But that's not this. This is a separate ritual. Take from the first fruits. Asher tavi me'artecha, that you will bring from the land, or bring forth from the land, really. Asher noten lach, and that God, again, second reference to who gave you the land. It's not your land. This land is my land. This land is your land. No, this land is God's land. This land is God's land. Gave it to us. And v'samta batene, and we'll place it in a penne. Penne, it's a Hebrew word that only appears in this week's Torah portion. It means basket. But there are other more common words, like the word sal is a basket, sal, not sol. Sal.
Wow.
Sal. And tena is a unique Hebrew word that only appears in this week's Torah portion, only around the first fruits, and also in the blessing curses of the end of the parsha, blessed is your basket, and so on. So tena, we'll see why that's significant later on in the open book when we look at some Hasidic Torah. And you will bring it. So a lot of verbs here, right? You're bringing, you're placing. I was saying you're taking, you're bringing, you're placing, and you're walking. Bring it to the place that God, your God, will choose to as a dwelling place for the divine name. Okay? Now, more verbs. Uvata el hakohen, and now you will come to the priest. Asher yeh bayamim hahem, that will be in that day. Right? Also weird. Why? Whatever. Of course, you're going to bring it to the priest that's in that day. What other priest are you going to bring it to? Bring it to that priest, the one that will be at that day. Okay. A lot of questions on that. Tons of questions. But let's just, okay, it's prosaic. Bring to the priest. And now say to the priest, V'amarta elav. Are you with me in verse 3? You'll say to him, right? Higadeti hayom ladonai Elohecha. I am declaring, I'm storying, I am reciting. I mean, higadeti. Does that remind you of? Haggadah. Right? It reminds you of Haggadah. Haggadah. That's true. It should remind you of that. Because, as you'll see in a second, there's a connection between this recitation, these actual words, and the Haggadah itself. Okay? So, Vigati ayom ladonai Elohecha kibati, I have come el haaretz, to the land, asher yisba Adonai bavotenu latet lanu, that God has sworn and God has oathed to our ancestors to give to us. 3 verses and already 3 distinct statements that the land was given to us by God as an inheritance. Okay, this is part of the formula. Right? The Torah tells us that Moses, let's just zoom out for a second. Moshe is speaking to the children of Israel. Where? Bueller? Where? Where is Moshe speaking to the children of Israel? No. When is Moshe speaking to the children of Israel? Yossi, where is this happening? Where are they? At this moment, in the text. They're in the midbar. They're in the desert. Right. No. My question wasn't clear. So where's Moshe speaking to the people? He's speaking to the people who are where? They're in the desert. What's he talking about in the present moment? He's talking about when in the future. In the future, when you get to the land, Hayaki Devalar, when you're going to go into the land that God is giving you, this is what you have to say. So Moshe is, right, already saying, Moshe says, when you go to the land that God is giving you, 1. 2, when you go into the land that God is giving you, this is what you're going to say in that land that God is giving you. Keep saying that God is giving you, that God is giving you. When you get to that land, the one that God is giving you. And then you're going to come to the Kohen, who will be in the place where God has chosen. Then you say these words that I'm telling you, that God has given you this land. Okay, we got it, Moshe, we got it. God gave us a land. Okay, great. Verse 4. Now, the lakach al kohen hatenemi adecha. Like, why these 4 words? And then the Kohen will be active. The Kohen will take the teneh, the basket, from your hands. And in the Mishnah later on, a couple thousand years later, the Mishnah says you have to wave it. He's going to do it to nufa. He's going to wave the basket. He's going to do a little, dance with the basket. Okay. That's a little basket dance. And then he places it, its name is Bach Adonai Lecha. Then he'll place it before the Mizbech, before the altar. You getting this? Bikurim dance? Okay. And then at that moment, after the priest has placed the basket down, now the Torah continues with its directions. This is very staged experience, right? Now, then Moshe says, you go. Now it's like, he's going to wave it. Wait, go. And he says, go. Ve'anita ve'amarta. And then you respond and you say out loud. Lifnei Adonai Elohecha, before God. Arami oved avi. Vayered Mitzrayma. My father was a lost Aramean, a fugitive, a refugee, who went down to Egypt, Vayered Mitzrayma, Vayagar Sham b'mtei me'at, and lived there as a minority, as an ethnic minority. Vayisham the Goy Gadol, but there grew into a great nation, Atzum, strong and numerous. Vayareinu otanu Mitzrim ve'anunu, and the Mitzrim, the Egyptians, made us suffer. They were harsh with us and gave us back-breaking labor. They placed hard labor on us. And we cried out to the God of our ancestors. And God saw all of these things, our plea and our plight, our misery, our oppression. In verse 8, with a strong arm, God took us out with an outstretched, with Roa Netuyah, over Maragadol, with great and wondrous things, Osos and Movsim, signs, miracles. Verse 9, and took us to this place. And God gave us this place again. The 5th time. And it's Eretz, Zavat Chalav, Chalav Udvash. The land flowing with milk and honey. And then the capping verse, verse 10. But Ata hineheveti et reshit pri adama. I brought the beginnings of the fruits of my field. Asher natata li, that you have given to me, God. I placed it before you, and I prostrate myself in vishtachavita. This feels to be that Moshe is now giving. He interrupts. He says, the last verb, Asher natata li Adonai, and I place it before you. And then Moshe says, now you prostrate, vishtachavita. It's now not going to bow before God, and you're done. And then this verse 11, which ends the entire piece, like you should be happy. Be happy, be joyous with all the good that God has given you and your home. You, the Levite, and the Ger, the stranger who is in your midst. And this is the Bikurim. This is called Mikra Bikurim, Kriyat Bikurim. And what that last piece where it starts with Aramean, a lost Aramean was my father, what is that from? People are recognizing it's from the Haggadah. So this Haggadah, it says you are to Haggadah, you are to say this recitation, which itself is a Haggadah, itself becomes a part of the rabbinic construction of a Haggadah that has nothing to do with first fruits, but it's a historical narrative that situates us as the people that were once lost and now are found, or now we're in Egypt, and then God took us out. So the glaring question, of course, on all of this is, what's going on here? Like, what is happening with Bikurim? Why does the Bikurim ritual, why are we reciting this? There's no other place in any part of the Torah where this recitation has to happen vis-a-vis tithing or taxing. The structure of it is also odd. It's not Thanksgiving as such, but adds an entire overlay of national memory and of story, right? It doesn't speak to like the bounty of the land, but to the historical divine. It's not talking about God's fecundity and God's power to make things grow from the soil. There's no mention here of the miraculous nature of agriculture, right? That the land depends upon rain. Thank you, God, for the rain. Like, what is essentially happening here? And what's its function? What's its purpose in ancient Israelite pedagogy, right? And how are we to understand it? And then spiritually, looking at a couple of beautiful Torahs from the Hasidic Massive on how to, of course, this ritual doesn't no longer takes place because it has to take place in the place where God, in the temple, God's name is, as it were, dwelling. So how did later generations work with Bikurim as a spiritual practice? So that's, I guess, the question. So let's look at Everett Fox and the way that he frames these sources. As a general overview of Everett Fox in source number 2. In a climactic set of ceremonies, those who work the land are to acknowledge God's ownership of the soil. Through the offering of first fruits, the memory of the Exodus and the gift of the land are kept immediate. It's in the first person, I have entered the land. Even I, who's 20 generations later, I entered the land. Me. This reminds us in a moment of the Haggadah too, right? Exactly. The descendants' rootedness in a land flowing with milk and honey is made to contrast with the ancestors' wandering. And this characterization of the land and thanksgiving for its produce is reiterated in the brief section about tithing, which happens in a moment, in the very next moment in the Torah, verse 12. So thus the land is not taken for granted. And Israel celebrates not the sexuality of the gods as the source of the soil's fertility, but rather the gift of a God who has intervened in human history. This chapter is a fitting end to the sequence of laws in Deuteronomy, emphasizing the gift of the land. As Buber pointed out, give in various permutations occurs 7 times in the text. Natan, Natan, Natan. Right? And so there's something here about the giftedness of the land, not taking the land for granted. That is potentially a strong counter-narrative to the farmer's own story of how his hands brought it forth. Or to a Zionist narrative that this land, right, is ours because we took it by force, right? Or whatever it is, we took it by right, whatever the narrative might be. The Torah wants us to know that the land belongs not to us or to any of its inhabitants, but to God. And that those who live there are living there as stewards of the land, not as owners of the land. There's no greater moment of that than in bringing forth fruits. You become the biggest, right, purveyor of oranges in the land of Israel, and you have to bring them and say, thank you, God, for giving us this land. I know it's a gift. We'll finish this in a second, and then Wendy, okay? Hold that thought. The gift may be revoked. That's the point. The gift may be revoked if the society does not uphold the covenant. This is a clear piece of biblical theology. The land is a gift, and those who were in the land, various ways of understanding this, were not upholding the kind of the society that God wanted, and that those who are now going to be its stewards must also uphold the land. And the way that the prophets framed the exile of the Israelites was by saying that that the land did not have time to take its shmita and rest, and right, so we were expelled from the land until we were ready to receive it again. So that's a deep notion, and I'm going to talk about the pedagogy here in a second. Wendy, go ahead.
Had to develop a certain amount of maturity so the quality of their food is appropriate. Also, the Israelites had to develop a maturity until they were at a point where they could emotionally, physically, spiritually go into the land.
Right, there's a beautiful parallelism between fruit-bearing trees specifically, but this is also about fruit of the ground. But fruit-bearing trees, let's say, there's a maturity before you bring their fruits right to the market. It has to be 3 years. In the fourth year, then you take them up to Jerusalem, what's known as Orla. And so Wendy's saying very beautifully and midrashically that the same thing is true of the Jewish people, that we needed to become mature enough and still need to be mature enough to receive the land and its fruits and so on, and recognize its givenness, not its contingency, right? It's like contingency. Okay, beautiful. So let's look at source 3, just to get a sense
Hey,
of how
sorry,
radical
Rabbi.
this is.
I'm sorry, Rabbi David, before we continue, since the sound is a bit weird, can you just paraphrase Wendy's comment for a second, please?
Sure. Yes. Wendy was again saying that the maturity of fruit-bearing trees is on full display because the rules around it, as Leviticus points out, the book of Leviticus, that the first 3 years of a tree's yield are not right. We're not to bring or eat any of the fruits from the first 3 years, or nor from the fruits of the fourth year. The fourth year fruits are called orla, and they're brought up to the temple. It's not exactly the same thing as bikurim, but there is a parallelism between the maturity that is expected of us vis-a-vis the fruit-bearing trees and the maturity expected of us as Israelites, as Jews, who receive the land in a particular way. And that maturity is underscored. Is that right, Wendy? Okay. Did everybody get that? Okay. Let's look at source 3. This is from an academic in Hebrew University. It's a beautiful challenge to think about the Mikra Bikurim ritual in this way. The declaration of the first fruits is a bold text. The context of the passage in Deuteronomy, as part of Moshe's address to the Israelites on the plains of Moab, calls upon the Israelites wandering in the wilderness with no permanent ties to the earth to imagine themselves as farmers securely living in their own land. But simultaneously, the text demands of future farmers living in their own land that they remember their days as wanderers in the wilderness, and necessarily as well ponder the fragility of their own lives. Each audience, the imagined audience of the wilderness and the intended audience of the land, are at a remove from the text. Or in academic parlance, the text contains a double alienation. There's really a triple alienation because we're reading the text and we're neither of those. So what is this thinker saying about the structure of the Mikra Bikurim, of this Haggadah of sorts? There are 3 contexts, right? There's Moshe speaking to an audience in the desert who have not yet become stable. They're wanderers themselves. He's telling them about a future when maybe they, not likely them, but someone that is not them, their descendants rather, will live in a stable land that belongs to them. Imagine, like 1840, Pale of the Settlement, 1730 in Poland, right? 1600s in, earlier, 1400s in Spain, 1300s in Spain. One day you'll have land in the land of Israel. You'll have a farm, okay? So that's an alienation of sorts because it's so far off in the future. And it's remarkable, too, it's very hope-affirming. Like, I may not get there, said Martin Luther King, but one day we will get there, right? That's Moshe on the plains of Moab. We were slaves for 400 years. Jacob was an Aramean, lost, running away from his father-in-law Laban. His beloved son Joseph is, he thinks he's dead for 20 years. Then he goes back to life and moves down to Egypt. And in the beginning, everything's okay, but then things go south pretty quickly. That's our story, right? But one day you are going to have farms. One day you will read this. Amazing, right? It's an alienation, but it's also a dream. And it's vital as pedagogy to imagine telling people a better future. But what's the second alienation, which is even more, I think, more relevant in some ways for us as Jews living in the last 75 years with Israel, 76 years with Israel here in America, since George Washington's famous speech in Rhode Island. What's the second part of this text? What does she say? It's the,
When you're the farmer,
when you are the farmer,
think back.
think back.
Back into the wind with the
Right.
roaming and the wandering.
So here's this text that says that it's situated in the not yet redemptive moment, and teaches that not only will you have hope, but your hope will be maintained or sustained by your capacity to stretch back to where you came from. And in this, it mirrors without any, this is like clearly part of the rabbinic Haggadah methodology, right? When we are free men, women, people, we are to imagine ourselves as if we were once slaves. But here it's even more powerful because we don't have the ki'ilu. The ki'ilu in rabbinic theology is, in every generation we're to imagine ourselves as if we left Egypt. But here, when I recite the text, this is absolutely the text, we assume, many scholars assume this is the text that was recited at the temple by the farmer. I don't say as if, I say I was. My father, Arami Oved Avi, my father was a fugitive. And then you took us out. And now I hear, and I'm bringing, right, I was brought into this land, I. There's a real intense embodiment of this play, this acting. Not only does the individual, look at source 4, present their personal story as irretrievably enmeshed that of the nation, but they tell the national story as emphatically as their own. The national becomes the personal, the historic becomes the biographical. This mode of portrayal evokes the requirement of the night, on the night of the Seder, to recount the story of the Exodus, the Chol Dor Vador, in every generation. But in Deuteronomy 26, the dynamic is even more complex than that of Passover, because the farmer who recites the declaration of the first fruits is the active character, and the last appearing in the plot is directed in no uncertain terms to view themselves as the beneficiary of God who brought them to this land. He doesn't say, you brought my ancestors to the land, but I came, Bati, I came to this land. The account of national history invites the individual personally to experience the arrival in the land of Israel and to speak in behalf of the entire nation, present and past. This is, right, the passing on of the historic memory. This is a text whose main purpose is the transmission of the text itself, ensuring its perpetuation in future years. Amazing, right? Yeah, Tony.
It does seem like one's reminded of Dickens and it's the best of times and the worst of times, and the is, was, will be, that is the divine, is asking each of us perhaps to be on time and beyond time, which is to say we're situated between time and the timeless.
Where's the timeless here other than, we're in time, both in past, present, past, and future, embodied in the infinite present. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. The nexus of, because I would say that this is a deeply, we would say exoteric text. It's not speaking to mystical, boundaryless, selfless Zen. It's not Dogenji. It's not, right, all of us are, it's a deeply embedded form, right? The formless is in the capacity of the human being to transcend and hold together both past, present, and future in the nexus of the moment. And in that sense, to drop into the timeless moment, which is, of course, all of us share that equally. But it's a deeply historical pedagogy. Like in the frontal self that owns a farm, in the frontal Israelite who's living in a particular place at a particular time, this is a pedagogy of transmission of our story, our family story, our national story. And it intersects with the personal, and I would say it engulfs the personal. There is no personal story here. The farmer doesn't come say, I took a loan out from the bank in order to buy myself a farm over here in Nebraska, and that's the story. No, he's not even talking about how his family got here, right? This is the story of the embedded Israelite. And by the way, the Israelite here could be a convert. Of course, there are later rabbinic theology would say that, do women, were women, if you own land, then you can do this. But if you don't own land, right, women were not given land to own until, unless the story of, right, you don't have land from your brothers, whatever it is, and you have well, you do have the Benot Tzolchad who give a temporary reprieve on that, and they get land. But the rabbis say, of course, women are going to have to bring first fruits if they have a farm, for sure. And later on, Maimonides makes it very clear that converts, there was a very famous letter from Maimonides, in which he was asked by converts, can we say, in all honesty, my ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah? And he says, of course. And that wasn't all of Jewish history, by the way, but the same idea that once you are part of this nation, you are going to tell its foundational story. And its foundational story will not only be triumph and victory, but it will root you in the past, in trauma, in wounds, in scarcity, and situate your present abundance against the backdrop of the trials, tribulations, and exigencies that you were able to overcome. That's like a vital moment of tshuva. I don't know if Rabbi Koresh spoke about it last night, but we had been talking about that. Like, this is a remarkable text of potential tshuva. Like, we could have gone in a lot of different directions given who we were, but we're bringing our abundance to this moment. We're going to tell that story. But we're not going to elide over the story of where we came from. We had humble beginnings, right? Arami Oved Avi. And that also becomes a part of the Haggadah. And the general thrust of the Haggadah is you always move from degradation to dignity, from trauma to possibility, and from wounds to wisdom. Okay. Thoughts? I can't see, Caroline, I can't see if there are any hands raised because of the
there's
way
only
that,
one. It's Otterheim, yeah. Uh-huh.
So then, please, Caroline, from Zoomers.
Yeah, go for it, yeah. Mhm.
May I speak?
Yes, please, speak. We're listening.
Yeah. We think of the wilderness generation that died out. The people who Moshe is talking to are mostly those who were born in the wilderness, who did not personally experience the Exodus, except those who were under 20 at the time of the sin of the spies were not condemned to die in the wilderness. So there are people whom Moshe is speaking to who experienced the Exodus when they were young and will live long enough to enter the land and bring these bikurim. So these unique people in history will become the paradigm of, you feel that you have not yet arrived, and so you're supposed to imagine your future self reflecting both on where you are now and where you were in Egypt. And that's a powerful framing that all of us living in an unredeemed world should at least try to imagine a redeemed future while at the same time holding the unredeemed Egypt and at the same time honoring the journey. I wish I could put that into English. Dibarti.
No, you did, and it's an echo of what it's beautiful. It's very much the Viktor Frankl's answer for meeting on some level, that if you have a why to live for, you can put up with a lot of things, not everything. Certainly not the case that people who were not able to survive a horrific tragedy are not lacking in any way, shape, or form. But there's something very powerful about this as a tool for those who did experience the wounds and who did experience the scarcity. And Natan Sharansky, who was a refusenik, who found a future in his own imagination that could take him to where he wasn't yet. It's a very powerful tool that could, of course, be misused. Right? Leaving the present moment is always precarious because you might not come back to it, or it could be an escape, and sometimes we need that, and sometimes we need to stay put. But yeah, it's a very powerful reminder to remember that some of those who he was speaking to were not part of the pedagogical future, but part of the very present, therapeutic present, right? And that's a very powerful insight. I want to move into like the deeper purpose of this. Not just the deeper spiritual purpose, not the deeper national purpose. If you look at source 7, the Chinuch says this.
A little point.
You have my ear, literally.
So it's especially holy, 26, Deuteronomy 26, because 26, what does 26 equal? Yud Hey Vav Hey.
Yeah, it's in the chapter of God's name. Yeah.
Every time the clock goes to 3:26, I smile because that much more exciting and meaningful.
There you go, everybody. There it is. Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his name. Every time the clock hits 26, we're never going to forget that. So 26 is a special number. Yud Hey.
Yud
Vav
is
Hey.
10.
Hey
is
is
5.
Vav
Vav is 6. And
Hey.
Hey is 5. Equals 26.
26. I got in trouble once for saying that to a Rosh Yeshiva. He said, "Ooh, Mr. Kabbalah." I got in big trouble. Okay. Sure. From the root of this commandment, Sefer Chinuch is a book that tried to give rational explanations for the mitzvot and the Torah. What's the shoresh of this commandment? So that the human being arouses in their thoughts, draws in their heart, and the truth through the power of speech. You hear in this, by the way, the Haggadah. Like this Haggadah at the temple is very much like the Haggadah in our homes that the rabbis constructed. It's a precursor, like to bring to the power of speech, koach hadibur. There's something about articulating something that is different than thinking it, that when we recite out loud, right, this gratitude, when Hashem improved their well-being and blessed them with the land with fruits, they merited to bring the fruits to the temple. It is appropriate to stir your heart with speech and ponder that everything arrives to you from the mystery of the universe. The master, I'd rather say the mystery of the universe. And they should declare Hashem's kindness on ourselves and every member of Am Yisrael generally. Right? We begin the subject of Yaakov Avinu, that Hashem released him from Lavan, and then Egypt. In other words, all of this is trying to say, we are thankful for God's kindness, awakening of the soul with praise of Hashem and God's goodness, right? And we are meritorious and becomes blessed, and we were blessed, right? So this is, in the roots of the Bikurim practice, is the basic, like in all first things, thank God. Now, when the temple was destroyed, and you wonder where Bikurim went, I'll show you where it went. Fast forward to the last source. Or not the last source. I thought it was the last source. It is source 15 on the top of the page. Every morning, every single morning, we give Bikurim. Every morning we begin the day with gratitude. We begin the day with a lot of things, right? But the first thing that we do upon waking is to verbally express gratitude for this gift, which is life. Is it each day? Yeah, I will. Modeh ani, you know it because we sing it in shul. Modeh ani. Bifanecha, Melech HaVekayam, we say Ruach HaVekayam, King, Master, Mystery, Source, living, animating, that has given me, returned to me, Hechzarta bi nishmati, B'chemla rabba munatecha, with great kindness and compassion, great is your faithfulness. Now, it would be more analogous to the Haggadah of the Bikurim if we would also add a line about, right, where we came from, which of course is what we do. We don't say, thank you for giving me life. We say, thank you for returning me to life. We were dead. In other words, the analog of we were once slaves is, guess what? I just woke up. Where was I before I woke up? Before you woke me up, I was dead. My soul wasn't here. It was it was not here. Thank you for giving me life, for bringing me back, for me to experience team, that I'm alive now,
Returning my soul.
returning my soul.
Isn't that why you're supposed to wash your nails?
That's why you wash your hands afterwards, because there's a little dust that adheres in your hands, as it were, from having been. In other words, every morning is like resurrection of the dead.
With compassion,
With compassion.
because life's hard, and God understands that. And he offers it to you with compassion
Oh.
and an acknowledgement of that. And that's, to me, the distinction between that prayer and what we read in Deuteronomy. Because I don't personally see the compassion in God's commandments to the proto-Israelites. The emphasis is on fragility and on remembrance, on obligation, which is hard. And God doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't, the divine, a divine appreciation for the sheer overwhelming difficulty of what is being assigned to us. The task is overwhelming, and the obligation to observe the task is equally. And so it's nice that the rabbis acknowledge that with that word chemla. Finally.
There.
So I think that the chemla here is actually not. I would love to say that it's like your interpretation of chemla here is different than the way that I understand it. Chemla here doesn't mean to me that God is promising to have mercy on us as we go forward. But chemla is an acknowledgement that there is, we don't deserve to be reborn each and every day. There's a kind of like a theology of insufficiency. That to be reborn is compassionate, because it's not necessarily true that we are owed life. And so compassion comes from a place of a freely given gift that is not earned. It's a compassion to give us life again. And the Rabbi Munatecha, great is your faithfulness, is actually like our promise to do the best we can do with the gift that we've been given. You have faith in us that given that we've just been given alone, that we're not going to waste it, and that you're entrusting us with a precious incarnation to go and do the best we can, build a better world, and that you're not going to look back and say, "Wow, I can't believe I gave those good for nothing this gift, and they squandered it on a wasted life." And so that's to me, the fact that life is hard is true, and like the Torah gets that, and so the rabbis, but they also recognize that it's better to have been born than not to have been born, and that better a life of doing mitzvot than not. And so they're giving us another chance, God's giving us another chance, now that we've been reborn, to go and, do well with the gift that we were given. And I think that in the Deuteronomy text, the analog is that it's hard to live in the land and to have your own land and not become arrogant. It's not easy to live in the land and not think it was all your strength and your ingenuity and your startup nation. It's hard to go into the land and keep something bigger than you at the center of your consciousness. And that God is almost, the obligation here is another way of saying it's life or death. Like when it comes to life or death, it's not like you have an opportunity. It's like if you don't do it, you're going to destroy the world. That's the way I read obligation, not as patriarchal domination, but as life or death, urgency. Like go to the land and practice being a Bikurim kind of person, because if you don't, it's going to be really shitty and really bad, and you're going to get kicked out, and you'll be full of hubris, and we don't want that to happen. So do me a favor, listen to what I'm telling you. That's the way I hear it. I don't know if it's different slightly, right? Then
it is very different from what I just expressed.
yeah,
We say, "Otel Yisrael
Right.
Yisrael."
Right. So I want to, yeah,
Hold on to my compassion.
you hold on to, no, I don't think
Because
that
it's a lovely thing to
yeah,
believe in the morning, every morning.
right.
There is compassion associated with this task.
Absolutely. By the way, I'm not saying there are, I mean, Adonai Adonai Arachum Lechanun, God forgives. Salachti kidvarecha. We're going to a season of compassion. But I'm trying to be compassionate towards the text. You know, I don't see it lacking. I see it being an issue of incredible life or death urgency when Moshe speaks to the farmers. So, yeah. So, I don't even have any idea what time it is. Is it?
There it is, source of
It's
compassion
22.
and judgment,
Yeah.
and to know the way they come together.
Yes.
It's our way, to work it.
I want to read. I want to read a radical Hasidic Torah, so that we can shift the gear slightly to the spiritual, beyond gratitude, something more radical than that. And if you turn to source 16. No, not 16. Where's it might be before that. It's source 13. This source blew me away. It's completely Hasidic. So we're transporting ourselves from a very academic and slightly, I think, beautiful midrashic understanding of the mitzvah of Bikurim, the obligation of Bikurim. But when you're a Hasidic Rebbe in Poland in the 19th century, you've not been doing Bikurim now for almost, give or take 1,800 years, 1,600 years. What do you do with this teaching or this text? So I would have done the Baal Shem Tov, but I want to get to this because it just blew me out of the water. Are you there? In 13? You know, it would be helpful to me, Caroline, if you could. No, maybe you can't. Maybe I need to be the one that does this on our side, but I don't have I want to see everybody on the right side, but it needs the computer. It's okay. We have 20 minutes. Okay. So this is from the Ishbitzer Rebbe, one of the more radical Hasidic Rebbes in the Jewish tradition. He was a non-dualist. He was a determinist to some degree, argued that there was no free will on some level. A pretty out there Rebbe. Taught him during the pandemic. I taught him for a while. Haggadah. He writes, Haggadah, the word Haggadah, Romez al Dvarim Kashim. Now, in rabbinic literature, various speech acts, the words associated with various speech acts like lemor, to say, lidaber, lehagid, all of them have varying qualities to them. And the rabbis, in a number of places, say that the word Haggadah means to say things that are hard to hear, tough things. Now, we can argue whether or not how the rabbis got there, or we can discuss how the rabbis arrived at that place. They sometimes say contradictory things. The word used to speak lemor is a soft thing. Sometimes it's a hard thing. I mean, it's not always consistent. But let's go with this for a moment, that the word Haggadah, which means to recite or to tell, can be saying something that's difficult to hear. Okay? So based upon that premise, he's going to say this. What does it mean if the Torah says for you lahagid to the priest? It means that you're going to say hard things to the priest, things that the priest might not want to hear. Yeah? What might the priest not want to hear from a lowly farmer out in the boondocks? Listen to this. What does it mean that he's saying difficult things before the priest? Because he's alluding to the priest. He's winking to the priest. Even though you're over here, Mr. Cohen, working in the Vatican, in the shul, in the temple, you're a professional God man. You deal with holy things all the time. And me, I'm out in the field. You work over here in high tech, and I'm one of the deplorables that works over here, in the potato farm. I'm from Idaho. You're from the coastal elites. I don't know. I don't want to channel any of the political. something here about hierarchies, right? You're on the top of the food chain, Mr. Cohen, and I am just a poor farmer's kid. I'm just a poor boy, and my story is not told, right? I've squandered so here I am, and in Kovzeh, even so, kasher yagia nevesh mitzvah l'makom hamikdash u'medid bikurim, when the soul of a Jewish person would say, like, the regular human, very dogen. You come to the place of the priest, you come to the place of the letters, you come to the place of the scriptures, and you bring your first fruits. Az mivarer ki bechol makom haya b'kedusha kamo hakohen ha'oved. Isn't that yes? He says, in that moment when I'm standing for the Kohen and I say, no, I'm sorry, I only have carrots, I'm bringing my oranges. My field work was as holy as your work here in the temple. I'm bringing you my first fruits. These first fruits are kadosh, are holy. Kadosh, they're holy. And you are receiving my holy gift. I was out working in the temple of the field, and you were working in the temple over here in Jerusalem, and I'm bringing it to you. Me'er Shilach, in a very beautiful classic, like a Hasidic Torah, he says, it's in retrospect, he says, in that moment, saying to the religious mind, consciousness, you know what? Driving a cab, I was leading davening. I was working in Goldman Sachs, I was leading davening. I'm walking to the subway, I'm leading davening. It's bringing bikurim, it's bringing first fruits. And I have to say hard things. It's hard. Why is it hard for the Kohen to hear those things? Because then the Kohen starts to think, a little bit like very Cain and Abel-ish, a little bit, right? It's a little Siddhartha-ish. It's a little, East of Eden-ish. What was that? My whole life, I'm working to be this Apollonian, rule. I keep the rules. I'm working in the caste. And now some Schmendrick, it's very Salieri, a little bit with Mozart, I'm only mediocre. Now, he's not saying that, God, but he's saying the priest is also holy. He's not saying it's that you should give up the holy and just work in the field, right? He's not saying that, because that would also create another hierarchy, right? But he's saying that there's that at that moment that the farmer comes and brings, it's a moment that becomes universalistic. It's completely transcends the story. It's a story of the rabbit and the hare. It's the story of all of these binaries that we create between the holy and the profane, between Shabbat and the rest of the week. And maybe we don't always know, right? We can't always live in that consciousness, but at that moment, that's a practice of bikurim. Even if you don't have fields and you don't have fruit, for your average Jew, your average human being, to realize, that if I wake up in the morning and I experience God's compassion, that at that moment of recognition of that compassion, that's like, I'm in the Holy of Holies. Mm-hmm. I brought that's it. And you could do it 1,000 times a day.
It's a very sassy state.
It's so sassy.
In a tradition, it's so clean to distinguish between the sacred and the profane.
Absolutely. And can I add some sass to your sass? Can people hear Tomas's sasses? Tomas? So Tomas said that's a sassy statement for a tradition that wants to make distinctions and delineations between the sacred and the profane. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cohen Cook, first chief rabbi of Palestine, lived from 1865 to 1935, was known as the genius of Brodsky. I've spoken about him in the shul. I've never given an extended year learning his oeuvre. He's beloved he's owned by every part of modern Israeli society. Secularists love him because of his poetry and because of his mystics loved it. I mean, everybody loved Rav Kook. He was the elephant in the parable. Everybody grabbed a trunk, a leg, a piece of his tush, everything, everybody. Rav Kook, at one point in Rav Kook's career, he became hounded by the ultra-Orthodox old establishment in Jerusalem. Now, mind you, Rav Kook didn't look like me or you. He looked like a complete ultra-Orthodox. He was genius and punctilious in every element of his practice. He was as ultra as you could get. But upon arriving in Israel, he became the chief rabbi of then what's called Tel Aviv-Yafo. It was not two distinct cities. It was Tel Aviv-Yafo, the whole area. And Rav Kook went to meet the secular Zionists who had come to work the land, who rejected Judaism, and who were working the land, the Chalutzim, the original pioneers. Rav Kook then wrote a book called, the book's name is Arpelei Tohar, Clouds, Pure Dark Clouds. In that book that's impossible to really understand, it's completely mystical, allusions to things it's very difficult to understand. He writes a phrase that got him into so much trouble. He was excommunicated and hounded. He said, those who are working the fields are as holy as those who sit in the study halls reciting the sweet psalms of King David. That line, that was it. That was it. That line, I mean, the old yeshuv, the old guard thought that they hounded him. They posted plastered, posters all over Jerusalem calling Rav Kook a heretic and they burned his books. You couldn't get them. That, along with the fact that he once said that Jesus had charisma, got himself into big trouble. And he didn't even call him Jesus. He said Ha'ish Yadua. He said it's known that man, and then he said that he went off, but he had great charisma to bring people. So what you're saying, it is sassy, and the Me'ashilach is definitely the Hasidic movement was sassy, but it's part of their what Teilhard de Chardin would call the divinization of the world. That he believed that we were going to divinize the world, and that we had to break down those. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Yeah? And you wanted, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No.
I thought you had more on the sass. You do, yeah.
You have far more on that.
No, yes, go ahead, yes. And then I can't see if people have their hands raised, because I can't see Caroline. So if there are people who have their hands raised, please call them after Yossi goes. Yes. It's very Torah. It's totally Torah.
We're all holy. You may be the Kohen, I'm the farmer, but all we do is elevate the mundane. And that's what the Kohen does, and so the farmer elevates himself by bringing Bikurim. And we're all doing our taket, our mission in life. You were picked to be the Kohen, I'm the farmer, but we still are both equal.
Yeah, Mark just like, yeah, love it. I mean, that way. Caroline, are there people on the Zoom that have something to say? We can't see. It's one of those.
There are not currently, so if you have something to say, speak now or forever hold your peace, I guess, yeah.
Well, we can do another, who wants to do another Hasidic piece? Because I want to do another one. Let's do another one. Okay, Tony, can we just do another? Yeah, okay. Turn to number 17. They're all from the same author, but they're all radical and beautiful. There's the word tenet, by the way, in another source, I did say this stands for Tamim Nikudot Osios, that all letters in the Torah are letters, Otiot, Nikudot, they have vowels and they have music. And so tenet here becomes a standard, an acronym for language and the music of language. And you have to place your first fruits into the music of language. Right here, the Me'ashilach says a separate thing. He says, just like Batya was talking about the numerical value of God's name being 26, every Hebrew letter has a number. The word Tena is 9, 50, and 1, right? 9, Tet, Nun, 50, Aleph. That comes out to 60, right? Yeah. So if you put it into the basket, Batena is 62. Bet is 2. So Bat into the basket is 60 plus 2 is 62. So what else is numerically equivalent to 62? You could find literally an infinite number of things that are equivalent to 62. But he comes up with one, which is Ma Tov. Ma Tov is what is good. Ma Tov. And where does that phrase Ma Tov appear in the Bible? In Ecclesiastes, it says, right, Akol B'ito Ma Tov. Things that are at their time, in their time, are good, are Ma Tov, right? How good is something at its proper moment? It said that Batena is a basket that has a hole in it, right? It's perforated like a woven straw basket to show that the inside and the outside are not two, which again is the same Ishbitzer Torah about the breaking down of boundaries between above and below, between inside and outside. Sounds very much like a character from that new book that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. When your insides are made like your outside and your outsides like your inside, the kingdom will arrive. Right? This basket, you place your first fruits into a basket that represents integrity and transparency and being open, right? That which is inside is transparently, but you're not two-faced. That you're not putting on a show. You're inside. You can see through me, right? That is to show that even when the intention is for the sake of God, if it appears unpleasant on the surface, then He won't do it, because its inner nature must be like its outside appearance. This is related to the matter of King David when he wanted to go with Achash, the king of Gath, as explained in Parshat Lech Lecha. I'm not going to go there; it's too complicated. But in a sense, saying place your intention into a transparency tool is what you're doing connected on the outside to what your inner intention was on the inside, right? And then you'll know if you're ready to do it. If it's at that moment, if it's the right moment, maybe you need to ripen a little bit more. Maybe you're doing it because you want to be famous. You're doing it because you want this, you want that on the outside, but it's not connected to the inner source. So then it's not batene. It's not at mato. It's not the right moment. So here he does a very classic Hasidic move. He goes from a biblical text that's talking about the first fruits, and he says, no, it's much more complicated. It's about what we create in the world, how we align our intentions with what we see out in the world, what we bring in the world. And this is very much like Rabbi Adina Allen, who from the Jewish Studio Project, she was at our Shabbat services last night at the Y, Romemu East, and she talked in her book about the creative process and about the importance of art making. Right? That there's a process of art making, not making art, but art making that is essentially therapeutic because it reveals the truth of what was really going on. She said as a kid, her mother was a very famous art therapist, written a book about it. And Adina Allen, whose book is In the Place of All Possibility, she writes that when she used to come home with a problem, her mother would listen, and she'd say to her, have you made art on it yet? And then she would send her to the biggest room in her house, which was an art studio. And one of the principles of this studio project is, she has 4 basic principles. The first one is that that when you are making art, you don't comment. Like nobody comments on your artwork, and you don't comment on your own artwork. Number 2 is that you stay with it till the end. You have a fixed amount of time that you stay with it. And almost I'm forgetting, the notion being that the movement from the left brain to the right brain, the right brain to the left brain, you go back and forth, helps to deepen our sense of what is really going on under the surface of things. Become a tenet. We become antenna. We become antenna for the notion that that